How's it going, everybody? In this video, I'm going to be doing a review of the book 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. So 12 Rules for Life is best for those who are interested in psychology, history, and religion, or simply just want to understand Jordan Peterson's points, right? He's become something of a figure that's popularly known. This book's also good for those who are interested in stories and those who like sort of unique perspectives. The difficulty to digest 12 Rules for Life is fairly easy to read, and everyone should be able to take away, sort of the main points, especially the actual 12 rules are pretty simple to understand. But at times the narrative can feel a little convoluted, and some of the takes are aggressively firm. On to key insights. So, 12 Rules for Life is Jordan Peterson's attempt to condense sort of his knowledge on how to live a good life into 12 rules. If you want to call it condensing, it's still rather long. But by a good life, he means meaningful as opposed to sort of really ramping up that emotional state of happiness. So many of the rules are useful simply at face value, but Peterson explains in depth every single one, a lot of times using personal stories, psychology, history, religion, and all sorts of just different angles to try to bolster some of his points. It's a fairly long book, and it's easy enough to look up what the 12 rules actually are, so I'm not going to reiterate that here, and I'm not going to go through every single one, but instead what I'm going to do in this sort of review is pull out a few concepts that were either heavily repeated or seemed unique to me compared to other resources. So one of the big concepts that Peterson harps on, especially in the beginning of the book, is dominance hierarchies, right? And he goes on this long explanation of sort of lobster society as a way to explain that dominance hierarchies are ancient and natural, and living beings have always kind of vied for each. Early in the book, Peterson describes dominance hierarchies, and that's a theme that's fairly strong throughout. Basically, he talks about sort of lobster societies and uses that as an example for how different dominance hierarchies have been ancient and natural, and living beings have always sort of vied against each other for status and position. Now, for us, this basically means that the way we carry ourselves and the way that other individuals treat us is very important for how we feel and how we sort of respond to the actions around us. So by sort of bolstering our own confidence and esteem, whether we do that through sort of more fake ways or just kind of like faking it till you make it, body posture and positioning, or if we do it through sort of more mental sort of, for us this basically means that the way that we feel about ourselves, right, in the hierarchy and the way others perceive us in the hierarchy have a very strong impact on the way that we carry ourselves and the way that we interact with others. So if we can do things that help us believe we're higher status and help other people believe that we're higher status, we're going to see positive effects both in ourselves internally and externally in the world. In a similar vein, Peterson advises us to surround ourselves with people who are going to support us because in general, he argues, other people typically aren't great or naturally posed towards pushing others up, but instead sort of drag them down and enable you in things that are not necessarily good for your life. So curating your social circle and those connections can have a really big impact on sort of your standing and your feelings and all of these interrelated pieces. Another related concept is this idea that human life is full of stories, and the way that we tell these stories is not objective, right? We have a lot of power and control over the way that we tell our life story to ourselves. By changing some of the pieces of this story, we can elevate ourselves and give ourselves a higher standing in terms of internally we feel better about the things that we've done, and that allows us to move through the world in a more powerful way, right? A lot of people get stuck with these really negative or disempowering stories that really slow them down. Another major repeated theme is aiming for a better future. So, of course, books in this genre have overlapping themes, and aiming for a better future is a very common piece of sort of self-development. And that's echoed here, right? The angles Peterson takes on this concept are that you're actually morally obligated to be as good to yourself as you are to others and that you should only compare to yourself. And this is a little bit different because it puts a different weight on the reason behind why you should be continually striving for a better future. Now, for particular tools, Peterson uses some tools that are fairly common, sort of, breaking out of black and white thinking or success and failure thinking. Some of these ideas around envisioning a future for yourself, right? Having a nice, clear idea of what you're looking for and then working towards it. And one thing that he pushes on a little bit harder is that our scope, our vision, is by default really narrow. So to be able to find a target, we have to intentionally broaden our perspective and try to make sure that we see the full landscape of opportunity before we pin down what it is that we want. Because, if we have this very narrow view, we're not going to be able to necessarily see what the best path for us is. One of the really powerful questions that stands out is, what conflicts are you avoiding that will crush you in the long term, right? And I like that question because it really dives right into the thing that a lot of people need to solve to drastically improve their happiness. A lot of times people get stuck working on sort of these little side tangential things that are in the margins and may provide 1 or 2% change, when in reality, by facing just whatever conflict they're avoiding, they're able to really make a big difference. Being able to get concrete about what is making you happy or unhappy or making your life good or bad, and then aiming to do something to change it, is the difference between those who are able to really live a nice, full, meaningful life and those who sort of just coast through it and allow the world to deal them whatever hand they're going to be given. One of the 12 rules that's worth mentioning explicitly is this idea of it pursuing meaning over expedience. And the argument is fairly simple, which is to say that life is going to have challenges and struggles regardless of the path that you're on. If you focus on simply what's in front of you, what's expedient, we might not find ourselves fulfilled in the long term, and we'll miss out on a large portion of what makes life meaningful. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to do the opposite, which is to suffer maximally. We should still aim to reduce unnecessary suffering for ourselves and others, but that means that we should be paying attention to sort of the long-term costs and benefits of taking certain actions, right? Almost definitely you will have to suffer to achieve your larger life goals and find further fulfillment. If instead you sort of just chase right in front of you what's going to give you the next, dopamine hit, that next short high, you are unlikely to produce what most people will consider a good life for themselves. So it's more about just, projecting out a little bit further than just what's right in front of you. Peterson also has a few, what I would imagine are strong positions on raising children, right? He introduces an idea that children are naturally aggressive and that you should show them your place in the dominance hierarchy to show that you are more powerful than them, while still giving them space to express themselves, so that you find the balance between them developing themselves but still being respectful. I don't have a lot of personal experience in the parenting realm or in some of the backing research, so I found the points interesting, but it's definitely worth doing more research to understand where this position fits in regards to the broader body of knowledge, right? I am not well versed enough in that specific piece to say whether or not this advice is useful or not. But on the face of it, I would think that it's something that you need to be a little bit wary of, because you do need to make sure that there is enough of a boundary. Another concept out of this book that I found really interesting is digging into sort of the complexity of the world, right? There is an idea presented that the world is just so painfully complex that our mind is constantly hiding this complexity from us and making things really simple until something breaks, and that's when you see the full depth of the world sort of exposed. So one example is, most of the time you can use your computer to click on stuff, do whatever you want. And it's only when your computer actually breaks that you start seeing the level of complexity and depth that actually goes into how this thing works. And that's just one small piece, right? You can think the same thing for cars or for your actual house or whatever else, right? When you're in whatever the particular profession is, you have a much better understanding of sort of the depth of all the different pieces. But on our day-to-day, we sort of just act as though things operate at the high level of understanding that we have. Now, Peterson also argues that our brains function sort of similarly, right? That they are so complex, it's difficult to understand any of the nuances, let alone the entire thing. So it's one interesting perspective for why we should always be open to new possibilities and continuous learning, because there's just so much complexity and information in the world that we're never going to be able to contain it all in our minds. So there's always space for more effort towards self-development and learning and story shaping and these sorts of things that are known to increase happiness or the meaning and purpose of life. All right, final opinion. Overall, I found 12 Rules for Life to be an interesting but somewhat drawn out and winding read. There are some really unique and interesting ideas. There's some perspectives that, even though I don't necessarily agree, are fun to consider and sort of think about. And Peterson provides logical reasons for all of them. They may not all be convincing, and some of the subpoints get really drawn out, but at the face value, a lot of it is fairly useful. So it's a worthwhile read, I think, if you have time, but it's definitely lacking in a few areas, and you definitely need to read with some nuance in mind, because it is relatively long and there is several points where it sort of drags on. Other considerations. So, like I mentioned, some people are going to find that this book drags on quite a bit and often just gets distracted by long stories or points that are tangential to the main narrative, and you can find yourself sort of in a place completely different than where you were, a couple pages ago, or in my case, listening to it a couple minutes ago. Sometimes it feels like you're sort of losing the thread and just listening to sort of ideas about other things. So people looking for something succinct and straightforward, a resource that is really pointed, will probably be better served elsewhere. Another important note is that some readers may find the way that Peterson voices certain opinions, right, the way that he actually constructs them, to be a bit harsh or unforgiving. So he doesn't have any problem, expressing his ideas without holding back at all. So due to the nature of these opinions, some people might find them offensive or want to push back against them rather hard. So I definitely wouldn't recommend it for those who are very sensitive to consuming certain types of ideas. Obviously I think that it is good to be able to sort of steel yourself to any kinds of ideas so that you can process them and understand where they fit in your broader understanding of things, but some people may find it a little bit hard to digest from that point. One final note, and this was a little bit surprising to me, but there's a lot of religious history in the book, but so much of that focuses on the Bible. And Peterson never explicitly endorses Christianity, but there is a near constant stream of allusions to the Bible and Christianity that can feel very heavy-handed. In fact, there's so many allusions and references to Christianity that readers might feel like the book is written from a Christian angle, whether or not that's the actual intention. So if that's not your cup of tea, or that's something that you can't look past, this will be a bit hard to digest. I don't think, again, that there's any explicit endorsement of any particular Christian position, but the heavy use of the Bible as a place to draw sort of inspiration for stories and comparisons and these sort of things is very heavy-handed. All right, moving on to the applicable content. 1. What conflicts are you avoiding that will crush you in the long term? 2. What could you and would you do to make life better today? 3. Are your actions today leaning more towards meaning or expedience? So that's all I've got for this video. Hopefully that helps you get a little bit more of an understanding of what this book is about and if it's something that you want to pick up. Overall, like I said, I think it can be a worthwhile read, but it definitely fits in a specific position. That's all I've got for this video. So as always, if you have any questions, comments, topics you want me to cover, throw them down in the box below. I'll get to them as soon as I can, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please take a second to subscribe, as it really helps out a lot. If you're looking for more content, there's all sorts of information over at howtohappy.com, and if you want something a little bit more condensed and concise, I've also written the book Mindscaping, which is essentially a framework for optimizing happiness. So we'll have the link there as well, and that's all I've got. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.